May 23, 1943, North Atlantic, 540 kilometers southwest of Ireland. Captain Bernhard Mueller stood in the conning tower of U-672, scanning the gray horizon through his Zeiss binoculars. The sea was calm, too calm. After 5 war patrols spanning 18 months, Mueller had learned to trust his instincts, that feeling separating the living from the dead in these waters. Below deck, his crew of 48 men moved through the U-boat with practiced efficiency, understanding that every minute here was borrowed time. Mueller was no ordinary commander. At 31 years old, he had already sent 7 Allied merchant ships to the bottom, totaling 38,000 tons. The Iron Cross First Class on his uniform wasn't for show. 42 of his 48 crew members had served with him for at least 2 years, a remarkable feat when most U-boats never made it past their 3rd patrol. They trusted him because he brought them home alive, making decisions other commanders wouldn't dare. Aggressive when it mattered, cautious when survival demanded it. Then he heard something that shouldn't exist. Multiple distinct splashes, as if someone was dropping stones into the water in a perfect pattern around them. He grabbed the voice pipe immediately. The hydrophone operator's response chilled him more than the sounds themselves. The instruments showed nothing. No ship signatures, no aircraft engines, just the splashes. Mueller's jaw tightened. In all his training, in all his combat experience, he had never encountered anything like this. He ordered an immediate dive to 60 meters, silent running. The crew scrambled as the diesel engines cut off and electric motors engaged. U-672's bow tilted downward into the depths. Mueller descended to the control room, where his first watch officer Klaus Schellinger waited at the periscope with urgent news. Destroyer contact, bearing red 135, single screw, 18 knots, approaching from the north. A modern escort moving with military precision, distance 4,000 meters. Mueller nodded. A destroyer was manageable. The real prize was always the convoy it was escorting. The U-boat went completely silent. Every man knew the drill. The hydrophone operator monitored the destroyer's approach, calling out distances as the British warship closed in. Twin screws confirmed it was a Flower-class corvette, standard escort duty. Mueller felt something shift in his gut. A Flower-class meant a convoy nearby, which meant opportunity. But it also meant perhaps 3 hours before the destroyer's patrol brought it directly overhead. What Mueller didn't know was that HMS Oriole was maneuvering for position behind them, and above, vectored by radio intercepts, a Lockheed Hudson aircraft was altering its patrol course. The tension aboard a submerged U-boat waiting for an escort to pass overhead cannot be adequately described. 48 men, no ability to maneuver, no ability to run, just listening as the destroyer's propeller became louder and louder. Mueller sat motionless in his chair. His men knew not to speak. Time moved differently underwater when you were waiting for death. The hydrophone operator had his headset pressed tightly, calling out distances. 1,000 meters, 500 meters, 200 meters. The destroyer's screws became unmistakable, that characteristic churn of a steam turbine vibrating through the pressure hull. Then it passed directly overhead and faded. The destroyer had not detected them. Mueller's position remained secret. In another hour, when darkness came, he could risk a surface attack. That was all he needed. He ordered continuous monitoring and maintained silent running. What he didn't know was that he had approximately 6 hours to live. Full darkness came at 20-30 hours. Mueller ordered the U-boat to surface. The ballast tanks blew, deck vents opened, and U-672 rose through the dark water. On the surface at night, a U-boat was a hunter with every advantage. The conning tower broke through and Mueller was already on deck, his night vision adapted. He could see the convoy, 7 merchant vessels perhaps 30 kilometers away, slightly illuminated by starlight. No moon, perfect conditions. Battle stations were called. The torpedo crew raced to their positions. Schellinger calculated the firing solution with precision born from years of practice. Mueller raised his binoculars. The lead merchant vessel was a British freighter, perhaps 3,000 tons. Easy target. Then the second vessel, a larger cargo ship. Then the third. This convoy represented perhaps 22,000 tons of Allied supplies. Every ton he sank was a ton the Allies couldn't send to support their war effort. Schellinger called out the solution. 12,000 meters to the nearest merchant vessel. Destroyer bearing red 340, 8,000 meters distant, moving northeast. Solution ready. Mueller raised his hand and ordered the first salvo fired from all bow tubes. 2 torpedoes left the tubes, Type 7 CG-7E electrics running at 35 knots toward the convoy. Mueller turned to give orders for the second salvo. Then the sea around him exploded. Not ahead where the merchant ships were, but all around him. A pattern of splashes, enormous violent splashes erupting from the water in a perfect geometric arrangement. Directly in front, behind, to port, to starboard. Mueller had never seen anything like it. He screamed for a crash dive. Hard to starboard. All hands brace for impact. But there was nowhere to dive. The splashes weren't depth charges that arced down and exploded below. They were something else entirely, something hitting the water at extreme velocity. The first projectile struck the conning tower. It wasn't large, perhaps 1 kilogram, but it was traveling at 400 meters per second. It punched through the steel plating like a bullet, through paper, and detonated on contact with the pressure hull. Mueller felt the impact more than heard it. A wrenching, tearing sensation as his boat was violated. He felt himself falling, the world spinning. He tasted blood. His ears rang from the concussion. Around him, U-672 was coming apart. The conning tower filled with seawater. The superstructure torn open in 3 separate places. Below deck, the impact had ripped open the forward torpedo room. Water poured in. Men screamed. The boat tilted as pressure that had kept the Atlantic at bay was violated in dozens of locations simultaneously. Mueller pulled himself toward the voice pipe, ordering all compartments flooded and the men to surface. This was no longer submarine warfare. This was slaughter. The second pattern of projectiles arrived. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each one a self-propelled contact detonating warhead designed specifically to penetrate submarine hulls. Each one representing technology that Mueller, despite 18 months of combat, didn't know existed. He didn't know it was called the Hedgehog. He didn't know it was a forward-throwing mortar system that could attack without losing sonar contact. He didn't know it could fire 24 projectiles in 60 seconds in a pattern ensuring at least one would strike any submarine within range. He only knew he was dying. His boat was dying. His men were dying. U-672 sank in 94 seconds. Mueller and 36 men reached the water as the boat slipped beneath the surface. The water was 3 degrees Celsius, brutally cold. Not cold enough to kill immediately, but cold enough that hypothermia would begin within an hour. Mueller floated on a piece of wooden grating, his uniform saturated, his body already losing heat. Around him, the screams of dying men echoed across the water. 12 would never be recovered. HMS Oriole appeared first, the trawler that had been coordinating the attack with the destroyer. They threw life nets into the water. Mueller grabbed one and pulled himself up. A British sailor, seeing his German uniform, helped drag him onto the deck. 20 minutes later, the other escorts recovered the remaining survivors. Mueller found himself on the deck of HMS Sharpshooter, wrapped in a British naval blanket, shaking from cold and shock. An older British officer approached him. Royal Navy Captain James McIntyre, commanding the escort group. McIntyre spoke in fluent German, his tone not unkind but matter-of-fact. He explained that Mueller's boat had been caught by their newest weapon, the Hedgehog, a forward-firing mortar system. When U-672 attempted to surface for a night attack, they detected it on sonar and fired 24 shaped charges in a geometric pattern. Mueller never had a chance. Mueller said nothing, trying to process what he was hearing. A weapon system so advanced it could be deployed without losing sonar contact. A weapon system so devastating it could transform a successful night attack into catastrophe in 94 seconds. McIntyre continued, revealing this was the third U-boat they'd sunk with Hedgehog in 3 weeks. The message would reach German high command soon enough. The old rules of submarine warfare were finished. U-boats could no longer hunt convoys on the surface at night. Darkness was no longer cover. The British could see them, track them, and attack them without losing contact. Mueller understood with absolute clarity. Every U-boat commander in the Atlantic had believed that night surface attacks were their fundamental advantage. The escort couldn't see you, the convoy couldn't see you. This had been the doctrine for 3 years. But the Hedgehog fundamentally changed that dynamic, not through superior firepower, but through superior systems. A weapon that didn't require losing sonar contact. A weapon that didn't rely on prediction or luck. A weapon that turned the U-boat's traditional advantage into a fatal vulnerability. Mueller realized something deeper. The Hedgehog wasn't revolutionary because of its explosive power. U-boats had survived far more powerful depth charges. It was revolutionary because it fundamentally changed the relationship between attacker and defender. A U-boat that chose to attack had to surface. A surfaced U-boat could be detected by sonar. And a detected U-boat in May 1943 was a dead U-boat. The mathematics were simple and brutal. The advantage had shifted entirely to the escort. That night, sitting in the captain's cabin of HMS Sharpshooter, still shaking, Mueller realized something that would take the German Navy another month to understand. The Battle of the Atlantic hadn't been lost by shortage of U-boats, torpedoes, fuel, or supplies. It had been lost by a system of technologies working in perfect coordination. Hedgehog mortars, centimetric radar, high-frequency direction finding, escort carriers, sonar, coordinated convoy tactics. Each one was a piece of a comprehensive system that together made U-boat operations unsustainable. The high-frequency direction finding could locate a U-boat by its radio transmissions from hundreds of kilometers away. The centimetric radar could detect a surfaced U-boat at 30 kilometers in any weather. The escort carriers provided aircraft that could drop depth charges or attack with guns. And when a U-boat tried to defend itself by diving, sonar could track it underwater while the Hedgehog waited on the surface for the perfect moment to fire. Each component made the others more effective. Sonar found you. Radar confirmed your position. Direction finding cut off escape routes. Hedgehog prevented diving to safety. There was no counter-tactic, no evasion, no way out. Admiral Donitz would not understand this. The German Naval High Command would not understand this. They would interpret the collapse of the U-boat campaign in May 1943, Black May, when 43 U-boats were sunk and over 1,000 submariners died, as a shortage of boats, not a failure of understanding. But Mueller, sitting in that cabin on May 24, 1943, knowing that 36 men had been pulled alive from the water and 12 had died or vanished, understood the truth. The weapon wasn't the Hedgehog. The weapon was the system, and Germany had no answer for it. Bernhard Mueller spent 2 years in British and Canadian prisoner of war camps following the sinking of U-672. He survived the war and the peace that followed. Mueller later described May 23, 1943 as the night when submarine warfare fundamentally changed. Unlike most German commanders who blamed shortage of boats or lack of resources, Mueller understood something deeper. They had believed that courage, training, and determination could overcome any disadvantage. The Hedgehog taught them that technology wasn't an enhancement to war. It was war itself. Every ship they built, every tactic they developed, every brave man they sent to sea could all be rendered obsolete overnight by an enemy system that was more advanced. Mueller's insight was rare among German officers. Most attributed the U-boat losses to bad luck or insufficient resources. Mueller understood it was systems, integration, the Allies' ability to combine every technological advantage into one comprehensive anti-submarine warfare network that made individual courage irrelevant. The Hedgehog wasn't revolutionary because of its explosives. It was revolutionary because it fundamentally changed who controlled the battlefield. A U-boat that chose to attack had to surface. A surfaced U-boat could be detected. And a detected U-boat in May 1943 had no future. Technology had defeated courage, and the war would never be the same.